Spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David E.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.
Well, aloha, happy Monday morning to all of you tuning in here to Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Yunji Denise, usually joined by Ryan Kalei Suji, but he is in transit right now. As many of you know, he spent the week with the men's volleyball team up in Los Angeles. Their amazing win and bring home that national title. Of course, the team, many of them welcome home yesterday. Some more folks flying back today, and Ryan is one of those folks. So he's going to be back with us on Wednesday, but the news does go on, and we have a very important guest joining us this morning. Lori Kahikina, the CEO of the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, is joining us. Lori, thanks for being here this morning.
Good morning, Yunji. Thank you for having me.
You've had a very busy last few, I would say, basically since you took the job, but I would say some big news on Friday, the HART board approving the draft recovery plan. For those folks who have not been paying very, very close attention, tell us about how significant this is and what is in that plan.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that the public in general probably don't even understand what is a recovery plan. So just to back up a little bit, when we have a full funding grant agreement, basically it's a contract with the federal government, FTA. And when the project goes sideways, you need to do a recovery plan to the FTA on how you're going to get it done. How are you going to, the scope of the project, and how are you going to pay for it? So back in December, FTA wrote me a letter saying that, we understand the difficulties that this project is encountering. We are amenable to amending the full funding grant agreement, but also in that letter, they said we need a new recovery plan submitted no later than June 30th. Now, fast forward, you would think that's a lot of time from December to January, but when you back up what our schedule is to get that approval, to get it to FTA, it was a whirlwind for us. We have to get board approval first, and then it has to go to 2 readings at City Council committee and then full council. So we are so happy and thankful that the board approved it on Friday with some footnotes that we need to add per chair, our board chair. And we plan to go to Transportation Committee on May 24th. And if they do approve, then it goes to full council on June 1st. And if they approve, we send it immediately to FTA.
And the big sort of adaptation with this recovery plan is shortening the route. We haven't talked to you since the mayor had his State of the City and presented that to the residents of Honolulu. What are your thoughts on that new idea of putting the rail line, at least for now, ending it at South Street and Halekuila, and eventually perhaps making it to Ala Moana? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so we've been working hand in hand with administration, council chair, and our board chair. HART ran the numbers on what we think we can afford. And Mayor always said that in his campaigns, if the strategy doesn't make sense, right, the numbers don't make sense, then we need to find a new plan. And so we presented numbers to board chair, council chair, and administration, and we actually proposed downtown. And Mayor came back and said, no, I want you to find a way, and you get to Civic Center. That's one more station that shows the community we're only 1.25 miles shy and 2 stations short. But I cannot stress enough, all entities, we are all committed to getting to Ala Moana. It's just right now we are amending the federally funded portion with FTA, and that is to Civic Center. It's still a stretch for us, but Mayor wanted, like I said, he drew the line in the sand, and we're going to get there. We have the fundings to get there. We're shy about, in our recovery plan, about $120 million in surplus to get to Civic Center.
And why did you think that downtown might be more reasonable, and how did you make the numbers work to actually get to where you're going now?
That's a very good question. We thought downtown was reasonable because DTS already has an interconnectivity bus system, but our proposal also included the Pearl Highlands parking garage. And so with the new proposal to FTA, to Civic Center, we are temporarily deferring the Pearl Highlands parking garage. And I know that comes with some disappointment from the Leeward, the Central, and North Shore community. I did personally go out to meet with the three neighborhood boards, Pearl City, Waipahu, and Mililani, and they were actually quite supportive of HART, and they understood where we were coming from. But all three did submit resolutions to put the Pearl Highlands parking garage back. Mililani, in particular, was urging the federal government, city, and state governments to find the funds for HART to put it back. But we are still committed to servicing those communities. I spoke to one council member, and he said the cost for that parking garage is so astronomical. Find a better way, and we are committed to doing that, working hand in hand with DTS to find a better way. That council member suggested I speak to Leeward Community College or Pearl Highlands Shopping Center because they have the land already. They've already built on it, so it's better material than where we were proposing to put the Pearl Highlands parking garage. So that's something that we need to look at. Find a better way to serve the community than putting up a $330 million parking garage.
Well, let's explore that idea a little bit further. And so from what I'm understanding is that we basically, the HART basically decided to shelve the parking garage for now to add that extra stop. There's only so much money, and so that's where the give was. So do you think that the Pearl Highland parking garage will go up in the sort of iteration that we had imagined, or are you suggesting that we could have it somewhere else close by but connected like the community college? And what would that look like?
Yes, so that's actually what I was saying earlier, that maybe we can find a better location. But for your viewers that were watching on Friday, one of our own board members, Anthony Alto, said, if we're going to spend that amount of money on a parking garage, why don't we do an extension to Mililani instead? And I think that's a great idea, but we have to find a more cost-effective and viable option than putting it up where it's slated to go. I think there's better options that we can work together as a team with DTS city administration to find a better answer.
Yeah, and that parking garage, just so folks know, can you tell us the cost of that?
Oh, yes. So that was a 1,600 stall parking garage for $330 million. And, we're being criticized. HART is being criticized for inflating that number. And it's actually came in 2020, HART put out a P3 proposal. And the two bidders that came back were actually the ones that came up with that number. It's because of the soft substrate. So at 1,600 stalls, $330 million, it comes out to over $200,000 per stall. A local developer just did a parking garage in Kaka'ako, and his cost was about $45,000 per stall. So you can see the disparity there. We have to find a better way.
When you talk about a Mililani extension, are you actually talking about extending the rail line, then adding more rail route? And what would that look like?
Yes, that's exactly what he suggested. It is purely high-level concept. We've not delved into that, but I thought, wow, that's interesting. When I think of extensions, I was more thinking further to UH, because we do need to connect all of those campuses, and further leeward, because where we're at East Kapolei, it just ends abruptly. So I was thinking more those types of extensions first. But when he mentioned it on Friday, I said, oh, that's an idea that we need to explore.
Let's get back to that draft recovery plan. What is your impression from the FTA? I know that they haven't had a chance to actually look at the plan, but at first blush, how are they receiving the news that the rail route will likely be shortened to Kaka'ako?
Actually, they have seen the draft. They've been with us step by step all along the way. They are open to truncating the scope, the federally funded scope. What we do after that, from Civic Center to Alamona, or to UH for that matter, it's on us. If we do a full extension, let's say from Civic Center to UH, we are eligible for additional federal funding from Ala Moana to UH, but that 1.25 miles, I don't think we're eligible for FTA funds, but they are amenable to that scope. When they came down, they did their own risk refresh, and they were only looking at that truncated scope. I do have to say we're not in agreement with our numbers right now. Our costs that we put in the recovery plan, they feel because of the what they call uncertainty, which is the unknown unknowns. HART has put in contingencies in our and risk numbers in our recovery plan. They do feel we need to increase it by several hundred millions of dollars. And that's mainly because we don't know what's happening with inflation, the Ukraine-Russian war, the supply chain, all of those things. That's what they're labeling as unknown unknowns. So once we submit it to them, I think they may come back and say, HART, increase your numbers by several hundred million dollars. And then if they do that, we'll have to go through the process again of having the board approve, council approve, and then resubmitting it to FTA again.
You know, when Colleen Hanabusa was on this program not too long ago, just a few weeks back, she did say that the contribution from the federal government is, you know, as the scope of the project or as the budget seems to get bigger and bigger,
Yes.
their contribution is smaller and smaller as a percentage. And so is it really right that the FTA has so much of an impact and so much of a say on the length of this project, given how limited the impact of their money will eventually be? What are your thoughts on that?
She has a valid concern. I think initially the FTA portion was maybe a third, maybe even more. But right now it's much less. 83% is coming from local funds. The other 17% is coming from FTA. So she has a valid point. But unfortunately, with FTA funds, you are still obligated, you're still mandated to follow the regulations if you want all of the federal funds, or you don't have to return what they've already given us. So she's not the only one that has that concern. Other legislative politicians have told me the very same thing, and I can't argue with that logic. Oh, Yunji, one other thing I wanted to mention about the recovery plan. What we put in there is FTA gave a proposal to us on the release of the remaining FTA funds. So they still owe $744 million, and it was at $125 million tranches over the next 6 years. And we are in communication with them that if they can accelerate the release of those funds, it can save us quite a bit in financing costs, about $100 million. So I think that will have to be negotiated once we submit the final plan to FTA.
Okay, I want to bring in some questions from the audience. Denise has a question here saying, do you have a Dillingham plan yet? We know that was going to be or is going to be quite a complicated place to build it. So what's the latest on the Dillingham Corridor?
Oh, thank you for that question, Denise. So yes, we have the plans completed, and it's actually out on the street right now for bid. We're hoping to award that contract before the end of this year. So we are moving along in Dillingham, and people have asked. Dillingham is the critical path of the entire project. We can start construction all the way on the east side from Ala Moana, coming all the way back west to Dillingham with the utilities and guideway stations, and we would still be waiting for the utilities to be moved on Dillingham. So that is the crunch for us. So thank you for that question, and it's out on the street for bid right now.
In some of the reporting about Friday's meeting, one of the concerns that has come up is a decrease in the ridership. What's your estimation on ridership, especially now that folks are working from home, and if that parking structure is not there and there is no place for park and ride, that could prevent some people from using the train to commute?
Sure. So I wish Director Morton was with me. We did a press conference right after the board meeting, and he's more proficient at this. So I'm going to use numbers that HART staff and DTS staff have gotten together to do ridership. Now, understand ridership is a model, it's projections. So what I'm being told is for the first year, if HART had gone all the way, that if there's 84,000 riders is what we're anticipating, but with the truncated scope, we're anticipating a 16% decline with that truncated scope. But if you do transit ridership, so if you're putting bus and rail together, it's much less of an impact. It's maybe 3.7% decline. Now, I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers. I hope I'm not confusing your viewers, but just with the Pearl Highlands parking garage deferral, it's less than 2% impact. So we can't deny there is going to be an impact on ridership with the truncated scope and the deferral of the Pearl Highlands parking garage. But we're hoping with the enhanced bus service that DTS is putting together for the truncated scope on the east side from Civic Center to Ala Moana, and also the deferral of the parking garage to Central and North Shore, that the impacts can be minimized.
You know, I had a chance to go out to Kamakana for something for my kids last weekend, and I noticed, you see the stations, they're lit up, and the big question is, when can we actually get on these trains? So there had been some talk about turning over at least a portion of the route to the city sometime this year. What's the latest on that?
Oh, great. Thank you for bringing that up. So earlier in the year, we brought up the track issues, right? There was the wheel rail interface. The wheels were too thin for the tracks. And then on the parallel tracks, it was a little bit too tight gauge by 1/16 of an inch. I'm so happy to say that both issues have been addressed. We flew in the manganese welders. They completed all the welding within several weeks, and the tight gauge, we're able to unbolt, adjust, and they're ready to go. So right now, so we're able to run the trains full speed through the double crossovers. Right now, we're waiting for Hitachi to do their preliminary testing and commissioning to complete that exercise. They have to submit documentation to HART, and then we approve it with HDOT and DTS approval also, and then we go into trial running. So we are slated to go into trial running towards the end of June, beginning of July, and then we go at 90 days without any issues. If we can do that, we accomplish that, we are still hoping to hand this over to DTS and the city before the end of the year, and people can actually get on the train. So that's from East Kapolei to the stadium.
And do what's your anticipation in terms of the timing of that? Because initially, I think it had been August, but if you say 90 days without issue, and then if there's any issue, the 90 restarts, right?
Yes. So the best case scenario is October, that we could hand this over. But like you mentioned, if there's any issues in that 90 days, we have to start over. And so best case scenario is October, we hand it over to the city.
Okay, well, I can't wait to ride it from Kamakana
Yes.
to the stadium. I'm interested, you did mention that, Dillingham is that crunch point. So do you anticipate actually starting on the south, like at the South Street station, and building up while the rest of the route goes down? Is that how this is going to go, or will it go, sort of beginning to end in terms of the construction?
Okay, so prior this year, we did award another utilities contract, and that's from Iwilei to Ward Avenue. And so that contractor, Coluccio, we actually gave them a soft NTP in April so they could start giving us all of their submittals. But we anticipate construction to start June, July of this year. So that work is one contract and will commence shortly. The Dillingham Corridor, it really is just Dillingham up to Iwilei. And we will plan to award by October of this year, but it takes several months for them to mobilize, get all of their submittals and approvals from us. So I wouldn't anticipate construction to start on Dillingham till first quarter of next year. But so it is going to be congested. I apologize in advance to the residents and businesses along that route. We will work hand in hand with DTS and HDOT because people are going to be diverted to other major highways. So we have to work hand in hand with our partners to minimize the impacts to the community.
it's just so many moving parts to think
Yes.
about. And then the other thing that you did mention is that the eventual goal is go to Ala Moana and perhaps beyond to UH and perhaps even beyond that. Are you still working on that portion of the planning? And how does that work in terms of funding? Are you thinking about independently funding that, meaning that the residents of Honolulu pay for that? Or are you operating under trying to get some FTA money? How are
Right.
we working on that leg of the route?
Oh, difficult question, which I admit I don't have all the answers to. What we're planning on doing is because again we are so committed to getting to Ala Moana, and there's several years where we can try to find the additional funds. So the contract that we're putting out for the city center guideway and station. So what I talked about earlier was just the underground, the utilities part, but above ground, the guideway and stations. We are planning on putting out one contract from Middle Street all the way to Ala Moana. The base bid, though, will be with the funds that we know we have because we can certify we have that. And then bid additives. So if we find additional funds to Kaka'ako, to Ala Moana, we can add that on to the contract. We already have a bid from the contractor how much that's going to cost. So like I mentioned, we have several years to find that additional funds. It cannot be the FTA funds. It would have to be some other options, whether it's local funding. I haven't even broached the subject with the legislators on the extension of the GET, TAT. Our HART board chair, she is so insistent that our numbers are too conservative. Our construction costs are too conservative, and our income is too conservative. So she really feels we have the funds to get there, but right now I would rather be conservative because I do not want to come out to FTA or the community that our numbers are not this, they're this. So she feels that in our numbers, our construction costs will be here, so that extra funding can go towards the Ala Moana extension. And she also feels that our contingencies, so we have about $800 million in this recovery plan, contingencies. That's for the unknowns. Mm-hmm. And she's hoping that when we're managing this project, very prudently, that there's going to be extra contingency funds that we can use to go towards the extension towards Ala Moana. So, like I said, I don't have all of the answers today, but I'm hoping we do get them over the next couple of years to find that funding to get to Ala Moana.
When you took this job, first as interim and then as permanent, this public sentiment against rail, it was pretty strong. And I know
Yes.
that had to be pretty tough. I can't imagine that you could walk through Longs without someone saying something.
It's all right.
But I'm interested to know, obviously you have your sea legs, you are fully in it and fully committed, and even turned down a bonus opportunity as sort of a show of goodwill. Tell us a little bit about, what this job has been like and what you're hearing when you walk through Longs. Has the sentiment, is it changing at all, or are you still hearing a lot of criticism?
Actually, and I could be biased, but you're right. As I'm walking in the stores or restaurants, people will I don't even know who they are. And, and they'll say, thank you for everything that you're doing. We have a lot of confidence. You have changed the perspective of HART. And so in my gut, I think we are starting to change the tide. You're not going to please everyone, but I just hope people understand we're trying to be as best as we can. And the culture here at HART, I've tried to hammer it into all of our staff. When you make your decisions, you always make it in the best interest of the taxpayers. And you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong if you keep making those decisions in that way. And I really do think we're starting to change. When Mayor made that announcement in his State of the City address, we got flooded with phone calls and emails that don't stop, get all the way to Ala Moana. And so I hear less negativity and stopping at Middle Street. So I'd like to think we're changing it. Maybe that's just me being over optimistic, but have you heard?
I hear a little less grumbling, I'd say,
okay.
But who knows? I don't go out that much. I mean, it is interesting. And I think that one of the big things is everyone wants to ride this train. You know, we
Yes.
want to at least see it functional.
Yes.
I think that was one of the things, just, personally, when I go out there and I see all the lights on at these stations, and I know that there is a possibility, it feels like, okay, let's at least get going. If we've built all this infrastructure, let's
Yes.
start to use it.
Absolutely. I get that from my dad all the time. He's like, I want to ride this train before I can't walk anymore. I'm like, talk about the biggest pressure. That's the biggest pressure I think on me. I said, yes, Dad. The goal is before the end of the year, you'll be able to get on that train. I mean, you're not going to go all the way to downtown, but at least you get on it and ride it and see the benefits of it.
So, as we talked about at the top, you're up against a tight deadline. You have 2 hearings before the council, and then you go back to the board. Is that correct? And then the FTA by the 30th. Do you think that you'll be able to meet that deadline?
No, so we don't have to go back to the board. The board did approve on Friday. I am crossing my fingers that we get council approval on June 1st, and then we submit it immediately after that to FTA to meet that June 30 deadline. If FTA comes back that we are not in agreement with your numbers or anything else in the plan, we have to amend it, and then we have to go back through the process of board and council approval. But that doesn't have to be done before June 30th, because I honestly think FTA is going to take at least a couple of months to review and get their comments back to us.
Okay. In the meantime, we talked about public sentiment just a few minutes ago. We're just about out of time, but just a closing thought from you to the people who are watching. We're all paying for this train, even if we're not riding it yet. So what do you say to folks who may not be supportive of this project and still have a lot of reservations?
I was like that. Under Peter Carlisle, I was the same way. He would have us in cabinet saying, we need you folks to be champions for rail. And I said, why? I'm never going to ride it. I live on the windward side. Why do I care? And he said, Lori, you live on the windward side. You have H3, you have Cal Highway, you have Pali and Like, which is all federally funded. So you have yours already. But what about the people on the west side? And under Kirk Caldwell, when I became the E&V director, I would drive out to Kapolei to my office, going out and coming back, and just seeing those people in that traffic, it really touched me. And so I'm a supporter for rail. And for those who are not supporters, I understand, because it's been so frustrating trying to deal with HART. And I just hope that people are starting to see we're trying to be open, transparent, and honest, and good, bad, or ugly. I try to give you the truth of what's going on, and just have patience with us. We're going to get this done in the best way possible for the taxpayers.
Okay, Lori Kahikina, we appreciate your candor and your time this morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Well, always great to hear from Lori Kahikina. She really does, reveal everything. You get no nonsense from her. Interesting to hear her perspective on ending the route, at least for now, in Kaka'ako, though she does say that the goal is really to get to Ala Moana and eventually UH, perhaps beyond. Also interesting to hear about the sort of calculation that was made, that initially the plan was perhaps to end at downtown, but they decided with the mayor's backing to go all the way to South Street. But that does mean that the money has to come from somewhere. And so the Pearl Highlands parking garage is shelved for the moment. That parking garage is slated to cost more than $300 million. That's quite a hefty price tag given what it'll be used for. And so there is some thought that perhaps that money could be redirected in a different way, maybe put the garage somewhere else using existing infrastructure, and perhaps even building an extension into Mililani. That's the first I've heard of that. So that is a very interesting idea, and I'm sure that a lot of you will have thoughts on that. She did talk about the Dillingham Corridor and some of the challenges. We know that is going to be very cumbersome for the businesses and for people who travel through that area while the construction is going on. And she apologized in advance for that. We're going to be seeing a lot more as that construction begins. She's, of course, focused on this draft recovery plan that was approved by the HART board on Friday. If you missed the write-up, you can go back and look at Ashley Mizuo's reporting. She did a very good write-through about the HART board and some of the reservations that they have, but why they ultimately approve that plan. Lori Kahikina and her team now have to go before the City Council for 2 meetings to get approval. And if they approve that draft recovery plan, she will present it to the FTA. The deadline is June 30th, so they can waste no time on that. But always great to get an update on rail. We know that there are a lot of skeptics out there, and she did say, though, that the conversation that she's having has been changing a bit, and she hopes that as people get to ride the train, hopefully sometime this year, best case scenario would be October, but there are no guarantees for that would be perhaps changing public sentiment even more. So we will see. On Wednesday, we turn our attention to politics. Kai Kahele is our guest. He made big headlines over the weekend, of course, announcing that he is leaving Congress and joining the race for governor of Hawaii. So what are his plans? What his campaign strategy is? He has less than 100 days till the primary. And he is going to be accepting public money, public financing for his campaign. Of course, he is up against some financial challenges entering the race so late. So what that will all look like, Ryan will be back here to join us, and Kai Kahele will be here. So thank you so much for being with us. I'm Yanji Denise. We'll see you right back here Wednesday at 10:30. Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.